Have you ever wondered why mental health disorders are so easily misunderstood and misdiagnosed? Well, let's ponder for a moment. Mental health has always been a complex subject, a labyrinth of interwoven experiences, symptoms, and diagnoses. It's like a vast, intricate tapestry where threads of different colors represent different mental health disorders. But sometimes these threads overlap, and that's where the confusion begins. In the world of mental health, there are some disorders that are more misunderstood than others. Today, we're going to focus on 3 of them: complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or CPTSD, narcissistic personality disorder, and borderline personality disorder. These 3 disorders often find themselves entangled in a web of misconceptions, resulting in misdiagnoses and furthering societal stigma. Now, why is this? Part of the reason lies in the fact that these disorders share some overlapping symptoms, making it challenging to differentiate between them. Another reason is that, unfortunately, there's a general lack of understanding about these disorders. This lack of understanding isn't just amongst the general public, but also within the medical community. The nuances of these disorders are often overlooked, leading to incorrect diagnoses and ineffective treatment plans. It's a bit like mistaking a zebra for a horse. They might look similar at first glance, but a closer look reveals distinct differences. Similarly, CPTSD, narcissistic personality disorder, and borderline personality disorder may seem alike on the surface, but they are different in their origins, manifestations, and treatments. Societal stigma also plays a significant role in these misconceptions. Believe it or not, societal perceptions and prejudices can influence how we understand and respond to mental health disorders. This often results in people being labeled or judged unfairly, creating even more barriers to understanding and treatment. These misconceptions can have serious implications. Misdiagnosis can lead to ineffective treatment, which can, in turn, exacerbate symptoms and create a vicious cycle of misunderstanding and suffering. Now, let's delve deeper into these 3 disorders and see what sets them apart. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or CPTSD, often gets misdiagnosed. But why? To answer that, let's start by understanding what CPTSD is. It's a psychological disorder that can develop in response to prolonged, repeated experience of interpersonal trauma in a context where the individual has little or no chance of escape. Often, it's a result of enduring abuse or neglect during formative years, or being subjected to ongoing domestic violence or conflict. The symptoms of CPTSD are numerous and can be quite complex, which is part of the reason it's so often misdiagnosed. People with this disorder might experience emotional flashbacks, which are intense and often very sudden episodes of emotion that stem from past traumatic experiences. Unlike visual flashbacks, these don't necessarily bring back specific memories, but instead, the strong feelings associated with those past events. Another common symptom is a chronic and pervasive sense of shame. Individuals with CPTSD may feel deeply flawed, inferior, or worthless. They might blame themselves for the trauma they've endured, internalizing the negative messages they received from their abusers. Difficulties in relationships is another hallmark of CPTSD. People with this disorder may struggle to trust others, constantly fearing rejection or abandonment. They might have a hard time setting boundaries, or they might avoid close relationships altogether, fearing they'll be hurt again. These symptoms can be misunderstood or mistaken for other disorders, such as narcissistic personality disorder or borderline personality disorder. For instance, the emotional instability and difficulties in relationships seen in CPTSD can look a lot like the emotional dysregulation and fear of abandonment that are characteristic of borderline personality disorder. Similarly, the chronic shame in CPTSD might be misinterpreted as the self-centeredness seen in narcissistic personality disorder. But while there are some surface similarities, these disorders are fundamentally different. And that's why it's so important to understand CPTSD. Misdiagnosis can lead to ineffective or even harmful treatments. Understanding CPTSD is the first step in unraveling the knot of misdiagnosis. Narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD, is often perceived as mere vanity, but it's much more complicated than that. When we think of narcissism, we often imagine someone who is self-absorbed, overly confident, and excessively vain. However, narcissistic personality disorder is not just about vanity or a high self-esteem. It's a serious mental health condition characterized by a pattern of grandiosity, a constant need for admiration, and a lack of empathy towards others. A person with NPD tends to have an inflated sense of self-importance, often exaggerating their achievements or talents. They have a deep craving for admiration and validation from others, and often struggle when they don't receive it. They may manipulate or exploit others to achieve their own ends, showing little regard for the feelings or needs of others. Now, let's consider CPTSD, or complex post-traumatic stress disorder. This is a condition that can develop after a person has experienced prolonged or repeated trauma. It can cause a person to feel very insecure and untrusting, and they may struggle with controlling their emotions. So, where's the overlap? Well, some symptoms of CPTSD, such as emotional dysregulation, can appear similar to the manipulative behavior seen in NPD. Additionally, the sense of grandiosity in NPD can be misunderstood as the hypervigilance often seen in people with CPTSD. These similarities can lead to misdiagnosis, with CPTSD being mistaken for NPD and vice versa. However, it's crucial to remember that while there may be overlapping symptoms, these are distinct disorders with different treatment approaches. NPD is primarily treated with psychotherapy, focusing on helping the person develop a healthier self-image and more effective coping mechanisms. On the other hand, treatment for CPTSD often involves a combination of psychotherapy and medication, with an emphasis on addressing the underlying trauma. As we can see, NPD is a complex disorder that goes beyond simple narcissism. It's crucial to understand these complexities and nuances to ensure accurate diagnosis and effective treatment. Misdiagnosis can lead to inappropriate treatment, which can further exacerbate the individual's condition. Therefore, a deeper understanding of these disorders is not just a matter of academic interest, but a matter of health and well-being. Borderline personality disorder, or BPD, is often mistaken for emotional instability, but there's more to it. Let's dive into the deep end of BPD to see the full picture. BPD is characterized by a pattern of intense, unstable relationships, a persistent fear of abandonment, and unpredictable mood swings. These symptoms might seem like they're just about emotional instability, but they're representative of a deeper, more complex issue. Imagine constantly living in fear of being left alone, to the point where it impacts your relationships with others. People with BPD often find themselves caught in a cycle of intense love and intense hate for the same person, sometimes within the same day. This instability can be incredibly distressing, not just for the person with BPD, but for their loved ones as well. Now consider the mood swings. It's not just about being happy one moment and sad the next. It's about experiencing emotions at such an extreme level that it feels like an emotional roller coaster that never stops. This can lead to impulsive behaviors and an unstable self-image, further feeding into the cycle of instability. Now, you might be wondering, how does this tie into CPTSD? Well, individuals with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or CPTSD, often exhibit similar symptoms. They might have unstable relationships due to the trauma they've experienced, or display mood swings as a result of their emotional regulation being disrupted. This overlap can lead to misdiagnoses, where a person with CPTSD is labeled as having BPD and vice versa. This is why it's so important for mental health professionals to take a careful, nuanced approach when diagnosing these disorders. The symptoms might seem similar on the surface, but the underlying causes, treatments, and outcomes can be vastly different. So, let's not reduce BPD to mere emotional instability. It's a complex disorder that requires a holistic understanding of the individual and their experiences. It's not just about what you see on the surface, but what lies beneath. BPD is a complex disorder that requires careful diagnosis and understanding. While these disorders share some symptoms, it's important to understand their unique characteristics. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, and borderline personality disorder all share overlapping traits that can be quite confusing. However, the key to understanding them lies in the details, in their unique characteristics, and how they manifest in individuals. Let's start with CPTSD. It's a psychological disorder that can occur in response to prolonged exposure to traumatic events, often in childhood. It's characterized by feelings of terror, isolation, and the sensation of being trapped. Now, an individual with C-PTSD may present narcissistic traits, such as a preoccupation with their own feelings, or borderline traits like emotional instability. But these are generally responses to trauma, not inherent personality traits. Narcissistic personality disorder, on the other hand, is not a response to trauma. It's a long-standing pattern of grandiosity and an overwhelming need for admiration. Individuals with NPD often have a lack of empathy for others. While they may share the preoccupation with personal feelings seen in CPTSD, it's not born out of trauma, but rather out of a deep-seated sense of entitlement and superiority. Borderline personality disorder is characterized by a pervasive pattern of instability in interpersonal relationships, self-image, and emotions. An individual with BPD may exhibit intense emotional reactions that can seem similar to the emotional responses seen in CPTSD. However, while CPTSD reactions are typically tied to past traumas, BPD reactions are often triggered by present situations and can fluctuate rapidly. The overlap in symptoms between these disorders can lead to misdiagnosis. For instance, a person with CPTSD might be misdiagnosed with NPD or BPD because of shared traits like emotional instability or a preoccupation with personal feelings. However, understanding the root causes and the unique characteristics of each disorder can help differentiate between them. Recognizing the unique characteristics of each disorder is key to correct diagnosis and treatment. It's not just about the surface-level symptoms, but digging deeper to understand the person and their experiences. It's about seeing the individual behind the disorder. In our journey today, we have unraveled the complexities of CPTSD, NPD, and BPD. We've ventured into the labyrinth of human psychology, shedding light on the misconceptions that often cloud our understanding of these mental health disorders. Starting with the common misconceptions, we delved into the widespread confusion that surrounds these conditions. We learned that these disorders, while unique in their own ways, are often misunderstood and mistaken for one another due to their overlapping symptoms. We also became aware that this lack of understanding can lead to misdiagnosis, which can further complicate the treatment process and the path to recovery. We then dove into the depths of complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or CPTSD, a condition often resulting from prolonged exposure to traumatic events. We examined its nuances and how it manifests in different individuals, leading to a spectrum of symptoms that can sometimes resemble those of narcissistic and borderline personality disorders. Next, we explored the realm of narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD, and how it's more than just vanity. We learned about the deep-seated feelings of insecurity and the desperate need for validation that often drive individuals with this disorder. Through the lens of emotional instability, we delved into borderline personality disorder, or BPD. We discovered how intense emotional swings and fears of abandonment characterize this disorder, and how these symptoms can sometimes be mistaken for CPTSD or NPD. Finally, we highlighted the overlap and differences between these disorders, emphasizing the importance of accurate diagnosis for effective treatment. We stressed that understanding these disorders in their entirety, recognizing their unique characteristics, and differentiating them from each other are crucial steps in improving mental health care. With understanding and compassion, we can help change the narrative around mental health disorders and work towards better mental health for all. By fostering a more informed society, we can ensure that those struggling are not defined by their disorders, but rather recognized for their strength and resilience. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe to our channel.